Hey, folks. Good morning. Um, Happy to be here on Fed Day. We will have a show this afternoon. I'll mention it again towards the end of the show. We'll have a show this afternoon at 2 o'clock after the FOMC rate decision announcement, and then we'll talk for a little bit, and then we'll broadcast the press conference with Kevin Warsh after that. A consequential discussion simply because Kevin Warsh, new-ish Fed chair now. Secondly, it's still the market believes there's a 30% chance of a hike. That's the minority. Um, but nevertheless, we may get some insight as to whether we should be expecting a hike in September or no. Still continue to stand pat or even go the other way. So we're at an inflection point, potentially important inflection point. So uh, we'll be on and we'll listen. We'll discuss. There are others that are speculating that the press conference may be really short. If that is the case, since Warsh gave a longer press conference last time, his first time, because he needed to discuss his strategy as it relates to the Fed, the task forces that he's going to appoint, the policy that he's generally following, the rethink around data to be followed, and maybe he will not have to restate any of that. And there may be not much more that he wants to let out into the public sphere. And so we may get a very different type of Fed press conference. So another reason why one may want to listen. Regardless, hopefully you'll be able to join us this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Certainly, we will discuss it as well tomorrow morning. Um, Yesterday, um, so it is a mixed bag in the markets. If you listen to the popular press, the things that are the biggest, some of those have taken the largest of tumbles. At the same time, we had 67 new highs on the S&P 500. That's the most since February. Coca-Cola up by 5%, its best day since 2020. The Kospi, on the other hand, South Korea's index is down now 40% from its peak. That's right. The index for South Korea is down 40% from its peak in June. In June. So the rotation is serious. The rotation is deep. The Kospi still has a year-to-date gain of 35%. So if you're a long Kospi person from January 1, you may shed a tear over the fact that you've lost the outsized gains, but nevertheless, you're still left with a great gain for the year. The NASDAQ 100 is on track for its worst July in 24 years. SanDisk is down 50%, 50, in the past month. And the NASDAQ 100 is poised to enter correction territory with a 10% drop from its highs. Um, Saudi Prince Al Walid has come to the rescue for Lucid Motors, at least for right now. He has bought a 5% stake. I had mentioned that there was rumor swirling around potentially Lucid filing for bankruptcy off the heels of Polestar exiting the United States. Al Walid bought a $130 million stake. Al Walid has not been in the news a lot over the past couple of years. I would say maybe close to 10 years ago, he was an incredibly active and public profile investor, and was early to a lot of social media platforms as an investor. And he was even somewhat of an activist investor. What he plans to do with Lucid, we'll have to wait and see. He is a very well experienced investor. On the automobile front, since I'm on that anyway, I've spoken about automakers' difficulties. Aston Martin, which is a public company listed on the London Stock Exchange, posted a loss that was wider than expected. It's been having a tough time in terms of turnaround. And then I think more consequentially, BMW is going to cut 8,000 positions, mostly in Germany, and they are offering voluntary severance packages. BMW, also an independent automaker, just all around a tremendous amount of pain when it comes to autos. um, Spoken about, you know, everything from rates to insurance, cost of gasoline, and longevity of existing models on the used market to make it difficult for new production. And so, especially in and around Germany, one of the hearts of automobile manufacturing in Europe, it is a very difficult time, especially with the organized labor laws in the country. Eric, good morning. Please go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen. So, a few comments about this Korean market, about the memory chips, about the tech in general. I want the audience to remember that I told ahead of time, and I want to explain the methodology and the reasoning why, how to get the timing right, and why it matters. I told you many months ahead of time that I was expecting peak euphoria to be around the SpaceX IPO. And SpaceX IPO did happen. We had that euphoria week. I was expecting it to jump to 150 to 170 on the first day. It did exactly that. I was expecting it to reach 200 after that. It did exactly that. And peak euphoria means after that there's a U-turn because that's the peak, yeah. And that's exactly what happened. 1 week after that SpaceX IPO, you look at the Korean index. That's when it started U-turning as well. So the whole AI slash tech sector did start its U-turn there. And how do you get that timing? Well, first of all, it's experience of the market. And second, if you guys remember, and I want people to get used to how to put elements together. That other thing that I had talked to you about for more than a year, namely all these Chinese models coming at a low cost or sometimes zero cost to take on the big models. Sam Altman, remember about a week or 10 days before the SpaceX IPO, realized it and started sounding the alarm. So that gives you reinforcement that, yes, definitely, most likely after the SpaceX IPO, you're going to have the U turn. And indeed, it did happen. So it's important to be able to connect all the elements, reinforce your conviction at that point, and that's why it became to me probability 80-90% at that time that it would be the peak, and indeed it was. And we had that U-turn. Remember, also I told my brother to sell his SanDisk at 2300. Well, that was the day of the peak as well. I told him to put a hard stop at 1500. Thank God he did it because now it's at 1000. So methodology work matters. Understanding the elements that will influence the market matter. You don't have to blah blah about it every day, but you need to be able to pick up these elements which matter the most. Because let's all remember that you should not forget in the day-to-day noise that this big market boom we've had in the last 2.5 years or 3 years, since late 2023, is really the AI trade. So when that one changes, the winds change direction, you got to be able to change direction and not look back. and not worry about every day and stress out. This is very important. Some people don't need to do it. Who are those? People like David Ninkowski. They just look at the chart. The chart is telling you essentially what these money flows are doing. So somebody can actually, like Ninkowski, just look at the chart without looking at the news too much and figure it out because he sees that money is flowing out and going into other sectors. Another thing I will add now is that as money rotates into other sectors, we still have high valuation in terms of PE, in terms of historical norms, which is why Warren Buffett is still a lot in cash. I expect at some point, and when we have more negative, adverse information and cracks in the system, then even those will be readjusted, unless government prints money. The very peculiar thing in this time and age is that government is used to inject a lot of money now. And that changes the game. Instead of having big recession, you have big inflation. So inflation is the recession. That's how people get strangled by inflation instead of massive unemployment. However, with AI coming in, some employment will come on the horizon as well. Yet to be seen how much, but there's no way that it will have no effect. It will definitely have an effect. So this is how I'm looking at all that thing. Now to talk about SK Hynix individually, I want people to notice one thing is that SK Hynix missed its expectations, but there's one thing that they're doing. There's two reasons for that. SK Hynix is the company which has the biggest share of the high bandwidth memory that these data centers need. They are more pricey than consumer DRAM. So they're really specifically for data centers and heavy duty and heavy, very fast computing. And so they're taking the lead. So for long term, they're still in the leading position. China is coming up with DRAM chips, their production, but they're producing on the lower end. So for consumer, not the most advanced DRAM chips. So SK Hynix and Samsung, but especially SK Hynix, have a lead on that. So for the long term, there's still solidity in that company. The second thing that is affecting it is that it's starting next year, it's moving to long-term pricing, 3 to 5 year contracts, as they sell in volume and produce in volume for these big data centers. And so these contracts are like a bit lower in pricing. I mean, they're higher than what it usually is, but they increase maybe 15-20%. Whereas in the past few months, you had on the consumer segment maybe 30% increase. So it disadvantages SK Hynix in the short term for they didn't take advantage as much of that consumer DRAM price appreciation, but they still keep the lead technologically and solid contracts for the long term. So for them, it makes perfect sense. Maybe for the short term pricing of the share, it is not the best, but for the company, long term, securing long term contracts like that is a good way to go. So there's still some solidity in the company despite the price readjustment. Because I mean, it had gone parabolic, right? At some point, you need to have that retracement, which happened exactly as I said after the SpaceX IPO. Back to you, David.
Thank you, Eric. On the SK Hynix point, the Bank of England is probing its prime brokers in the UK about Asian equity risk. As we've discussed, leverage in the Korean market, particularly to its two largest companies, Samsung and SK Hynix, is enormous by any standards, and it amplifies the moves up or down on any given day. The UK, I think, sensibly wants to just make sure, with respect to its prime brokers, that it is not exposed. Its financial institutions, its securities industries is not exposed to a potential blow up from the Korean stock market. And the moves. The fact that SK Hynix missed on revenue by about 5%. Uh, its operating margin 76%. Its operating profit was off by a couple $1 billion. The stock traded off in the U.S. yesterday a bit more than 8%. In the pre-market today, it's down about one and change percent. I don't think the market is taking this company out to the woodshed the way it could in a company that is this large, this consequential, this levered, this much of a delta between trading price in Korea and the trading price in the United States. Anybody involved in this stock should be prepared potentially for some crazy moves. On the basis of an all around miss, I really don't think that the market is punishing SK Hynix all that bad. Um, and when we talk about this morning's focus, sure, we not only have today, Warsh speaking, Fed concern there, but we also have earnings out this afternoon, which may bleed over into the broader, chips AI play as well. Some earnings late today. Yesterday's largest loser in the U.S. market was SanDisk, down 11%, but that stock has also been over a period of time, a year. It has been one of the greatest gainers. So giving away some of the gains. Um, to mention also another story crossing relating to public equities. Kava is being sued. There's a real lawsuit. The leaders of the company, management and board, are being sued for insider trading and breach of fiduciary duty, and they're being sued by the Cleveland Bakers and Teamsters Pension Fund in the Delaware Chancery Court. So it's not just a fly by night investor or retail investor picking up the mantle on this. And they are alleging that the executives dumped stock while hiding the slowing growth. Granted, we chronicled, how this was a high flyer upon the IPO and then took a lot of heat off of the stock. But if they can prove that they did not share what they knew with the public and sold shares while hiding that information from the public or not disclosing it, this would be a serious blow to the leadership of that company and probably to the stock. Carlo, good morning to you, sir. Um, I don't know if you want to talk about the Russian charges against Pavel, and then anything else you'd like to chat about. I must say, I think that crypto has been holding pretty good despite all of the whiplash coming from tech, chips, AI, and so forth, and the NASDAQ. Let's see what the next leg higher brings. But go ahead, Carlo.
Yeah, good morning, David. Good morning, everyone. I agree with you. I think crypto is holding up incredibly well. And I still look at that ETH chart and it looks like it wants to break. So I'll continue to look at that. And as a barometer of where we're at here, some breaking news that I'm still trying to confirm, but apparently Bloomberg, and it's been posted by several people, 10 Democrat senators apparently have crossed the aisle and indicate that they are willing to vote for the Clarity Act. So, like I've been saying, this is not over by a long shot. And I'm waiting for Eleanor Tarrant to break this as well, to verify this, because she seems to have the best pulse on what is going on in D.C. With respect to the Clarity Act. But if this reporting is true, that a compromise appears to have been reached that has attracted at least 10 senators to come across the aisle on the Dem side to vote for the Clarity Act, then this is huge. And if I can get any confirmation of that, I'll be happy to report on that. Overnight, we did have this new.
Let me just
Yes,
put in a plug for Eleanor, even though
absolutely.
she hasn't asked me, folks. Eleanor is the host of Crypto America. She used to work at Fox. She used to work for Charlie Gasparino. She's been excellent. I think she's growing her platform even now in terms of video reach and hiring and so forth. I saw some posts about that. She's a very diligent reporter. She has really good chops. If you don't follow her, please go ahead and do so. She's an Oxford trained kid. She's smart. So please go ahead and give her a follow. And if she's ever able to join the show, that would be a treat. Go ahead, Carlo.
Yeah, I'll definitely try to send her an invite to do just that. I respect her work as well. I've had the pleasure of interviewing her on my podcast back when she was with Fox. And the thing that's great about her is that she is very, very locked into the community. I've hung out with her, met her at events, and she's widely regarded as being a very credible, balanced, and reliable source when it comes to all things crypto in DC. And I'm very proud to see what she's accomplished. It's well deserved. She's definitely put in the time building that reputation, and as an independent journalist now is building something pretty cool. So definitely give her a follow, and I will try to see if we can get her on to come talk one day. The other story that broke overnight, which I think is definitely worth talking about, is Russia has announced that they are charging the founder of Telegram, Pavel Durov, with aiding terrorism, and have put him on an international watch list, which means he now has a warrant for his arrest. The FSB alleges that Telegram enabled sabotage, terrorism, and extremism activities. And this is a continuation of what Telegram and Pavel have been going through. I think we talked about it last year that France had brought charges against him as well, and the Telegram app. And it's been an ongoing concern for anyone who is in the encrypted messaging sector. There's definitely been an assault on that layer of freedom of speech. He's been a very vocal critic of Russia and the Russian government banning people from getting access to these types of technologies. And it raises a broader concern, David, that I think we need to keep our eye on, because according to the Associated Press reporting on this, Russia obviously has had a history of locking out most mainstream social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and X. They've been banned in Russia. YouTube has been throttled, and messaging apps like Signal and Viber, et cetera, WhatsApp, Telegram have been restricted. And now that one nation is bringing this level of criminal charges against the founder of an encrypted communications app like Telegram, which has a token and is a pretty big player in the crypto sector, it begs the question of what's going to happen internationally with respect to the jurisdictions and how they interplay. Pavel has dual citizenship. He is in the UAE, and will the UAE block any attempt to extradite him? I would imagine yes. Will the United States take sides with Pavel and the UAE on this with respect to putting political pressure on Russia? Remains to be seen. But it is something now that a lot of tech founders, especially in the encrypted communication sector, have to worry about when they travel internationally, because Pavel, if you'll recall, I think had touched down in France, and that's where he was detained. So now he's got to worry about where he travels, and anytime he touches ground at an airport, whether there'll be any attempt to take him into custody on this. So the implications of this are pretty chilling, and definitely a very big story to keep an eye on. Back to you, David.
Awesome. No, thank you very much, Carlo. Certainly, freedom of speech and just being a platform is certainly something that we need to be cautious about in terms of valuing the underlying enterprise, and then b also what happens with the executives and leaders associated with those companies. Eric, go ahead.
Real quick interjection. It's interesting to see France taking the same approach to free speech as Russia. Unlikely bedfellows.
Yeah, I will add to that. Actually, what happens is, what Anas calls the deep state, and I call the war machine. They're the big actor behind it. That's why France went ahead. They did that thing. The story, it's really a disgusting story. Macron offered as a gift the French citizenship to Pavel Durov to entice him to be more trusting of France, come that way, become a citizen, represent, because he's got a company which is very well known. And we know that Europe likes to have business back into Europe. So he lured him, and then 2 years later, used that because as a French citizen, he locked him up in France when he was passing with his jet because he was a French citizen. Because once he got that French citizen, so that's when Macron did that bidding. There's nothing for Macron itself. It's really the intelligence machine which wants to be able to control information. And so Russia bothered him first. He got out of Russia and came to the Western world, which I think was a good move. Then he went to the UAE, but he never saw it coming that France would do the same. And the same can be done with Julian Assange, if you remember, with the United States and Edward Snowden. So when it comes to information, access to information, freedom of information, uh, intelligence agencies want their hands everywhere. And now Russia is doubling down even more, which means uh, they're losing the war, information war. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing something like that. They're probably angry that Ukrainians have been using Telegram a lot because it's very secure. And so they're really angry at that. And so it shows that there's some success for Telegram to remain somewhat free. But he had started to cave into France in order to get freed from France, to be able to go back to UAE. I don't know if he's still there or he's been completely released. But I don't like it because the Western world was the beacon for free speech, and it's eroding very much in the United States, in France, in UK, in Germany, and this is really the war machine taking over. Just like they're taking over, they started that Hormuz thing and decided to do the financial shenanigans with the insurance that Anas is talking about. And this is a very difficult era for all humans who are pro free speech, pro freedom of choice, pro general freedoms of the individuals at large in society. And as AI is coming, these same elements will try to use AI to completely control our lives. So it is a red flag for me, at least for the Western lifestyle that we love to have to a certain extent. And because the world is at war and the other side has China, which is very authoritarian and very controlling on information, there will be more and more of that tendency in the Western world to want to control from the governments as well. So this battle, which is happening for the open models, and then the battle between the AI in the United States, is something we should watch closely because it's going to be a key thing as to whether we go full 1984 and beyond, or we still have a chance. Back to you, David, and to Carlo.
Eric, sorry, I wanted to jump in. First of all, this app has just been glitching so bad today. This is like the fourth time I've had to drop and jump back. I agree with you, and Pavel is a very outspoken critic, and he is definitely someone who is not afraid to fight. As a matter of fact, the official X account for Telegram posted in what appears to be in response to this news a picture of Pavel shooting the middle finger. So you kind of have the indirect comment back from Telegram as far as their position on this. And I agree with you, Eric. It is concerning because you can imagine a scenario in which a U.S. tech founder could get implicated in a similar type of a international criminal charge. And then the question becomes, if Russia wanted to seek the extradition of an American, say like an Elon Musk, which he's had his issues with France as well, would the United States intervene, and which side would they pick in the fight? It is alarming that what you say on and how you engage on social media apps and free speech can not only have implications at home for you, but can have broader international implications, because if you get put on this type of a watch list, or if you're targeted, it can limit your movements. You have to think twice of what countries you travel through and what exposure you have to getting detained in those countries. And these are realities that a lot of people are facing when they decide to, number one, speak publicly, launch applications that are critical and that facilitate public free speech, and what the consequences are for them individually and their companies. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
Well, let's not forget that it actually, I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, happened in the UK when an American landed because they had posted some derogatory remarks on social. They got briefly arrested. Pretty sure they got released quickly, but it's starting to make its way into the West as well.
Absolutely is.
We don't usually go down this rabbit hole fairly often, but I, you
This
know,
is usually
the
the response when I say something. David usually
no,
has
no,
to
not
say,
definitely not. No, no,
yeah.
no. I'm actually since we've got two shows today, and since the market is not doing anything,
The unofficial
you know,
CEO of Cracker Barrel has spoken, David. Gosh darn it.
all right, I was waiting for that. Right, we need to discuss the change in CEO. We'll do that in a second. But you know, on the other side of this free speech point is that I think, at least as long as I can remember, there has not been as much hatred, divisiveness, and gusto to act in hatred and anger as we have now. And so, you know, if I'm a leader of anything, a city, a state, a country, you have to think about, you know, yes, freedom of speech is really important, sacrosanct. At the same time, you don't want there to be all hell breaking loose in your streets. And you know, the level of violence all around, physical and verbal violence all around, is really bad. I don't think people are engaging at all. They're doing a lot of fighting, and I get a little concerned. And I listen. Trust me, I value and I respect the freedom of speech. Being a lawyer trained, but at the same time, I think we're in some pretty crazy times. On top of that, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm saying to go ahead and curb the freedom of speech. It's just it needs to be thought through in the current environment. Um, in the case of this is not going to be such an elegant segue. I'll get back in a second, Justin, to the CEO of Cracker Barrel. Paul Mangione, I don't know if he's still here. Bummer, he left. New York City started to send out the Pierre de Terre tax letters. They didn't send one to me because I don't own a home in New York City in the five boroughs of New York. But I got one from a friend of mine. It is crazy. What essentially they did is send a letter to anybody who has a home with a market value greater than $5 million, and said you have to respond by August 21st claiming an exemption being that it is your primary residence, right? This is only for non-primary residence people. So what they did was they went the opposite direction. The onus is on you as the homeowner of a home that is valued greater than 5 million. The onus is on you to prove that New York City is your primary residence. And so even though there may be, I don't know, 10 in the tens of thousands of people that, you know, probably have their non-primary residence in New York City, and it's over a $5 million value, I think they sent out for sure north of 100,000 of these letters.
David,
Easy.
imagine being a realtor in New York and the marketing opportunity this presents to list your house and get out of the city.
I look, brokers always make money from movement, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be an upward movement, right? Goldman Sachs makes as much money in a bull market. They may make more money in a bear market if it's sharply bearish. There's panic selling going on. So I totally agree with you, Carlo. The flip side of that is, remember, the panic selling though is on a very pricey home. The universe of buyers for homes like that is not as large as one would hope. So it may be tempered in a way, but I think it's totally the people have. I mean, remember, it's the summertime, folks. Folks that own $5 million plus homes are not even in New York City in their homes in the summertime. They have until between July and August 21st. You can imagine who else is cleaning up on this: lawyers. I'm not going to do this on my own. If I own a north of $5 million home, I'm going to call my lawyer and say, properly respond to this. The lawyer obviously is going to use ChatGPT to craft a letter in 2 seconds, and they'll need some proof, some documentation, whatever it may be, and then they'll go ahead and send it back. So the brokers are making money, the lawyers are making money, and sure as hell, the city is employing a lot of people that need to review these things to see whether the truth is being told and an exemption should properly be granted or whether there should be no exemption. Paul, I see you're back in the audience. Did you see any of these letters? Because to me, it's absolutely breathtaking. Everyone gets a security code. You have to log into the website. You have to post a bunch of your stuff, a bunch of documentation. And if you don't post by August 21st, there's a shot clock on this thing. And it's not cheap. The one I have is the market value of the home in 2027 is assessed at $6.1 million. And I actually know this person's home, and it's not in Manhattan, okay? It's not, whatever. Let's leave it aside. It is not an outstanding home, okay? The surcharge is 50 grand.
I can totally
That's not,
see an injunction coming in to stop this from happening. Can't you, David?
you know what? If Mamdani wants to get this through, I actually I don't know. It's going to depend on the judge that hears this to issue the injunction. I mean, there's already chatter about the fact that people are pressing Hochul, who as governor has the legal right to fire Mamdani. There is pressure being put on her to fire him. I doubt that they'll go anywhere because she's actually subservient to him. But nevertheless, it's somewhat of an uproar. Now I see Andy's up on stage. Andy, anything to say on this or anything else, especially with regard to, Fed Day?
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of this, it really reminds me of a lot of the tactics that sponsors of commercial real estate use in affordable housing to get tenants out of the building when they're not actually low enough income, right? I mean, there's all these little dirty tricks that you have to prove your income. They'll change locks and they'll have you come downstairs and to get the new key, and then when you're there, you got to prove that you have the income, and then right there they'll boot you out of the property. So um, I applaud Mamdani just from the creativity, but I think this is absolutely ridiculous in terms of the tax. But it's pretty funny in that regard. So nothing else on that front. I just it reminded me of some of these dirty tricks that sponsors use on some of these affordable housing.
No doubt.
In terms of the Fed and ahead of the Fed, not a lot to say. Different than yesterday. I think that we're clearly at a point that the Fed should raise. I don't think that they will. I think they'll come out with extremely hawkish commentary to outline the plan to raise in September. Clearly, with this war and everything going on, it's on again, off again, on again. Prices are going to go up, right? It's just it's a matter of how it works. The longer this goes, the longer there's a lack of clarity. That means that there's a lack of understanding in terms of supply, and that filters through the entire system, and it just means there's going to be higher prices across the board. You couple that with the AI and the cost for hardware and other pieces, it's just going across sectors of issues. You throw in lettuce issues, you throw in beef problems. I know we got some stuff in Mexico released, but there's just so many pressures in terms of prices, and the economy is actually doing pretty darn well, right? So, and people are employed, so all that bakes into really not any insight that anyone that has any understanding of the economy to have any idea that prices have any reason to slow down their movement upward. So it really bakes into a perfect scenario where you should be raising rates here, and I think the curve will flatten if they come out hawkish enough. But he said he wants a good family fight. I think he's going to get one. It's going to be really interesting what comes out of this, if anything leaks. He wants to keep it a pretty tight room. but it's going to be very, very interesting to see, Powell and his faction and Warsh, and do they get along? Do they not get along? What do the minutes say? Which we won't get for a little while, but it's going to be a fascinating. It's going to be a fascinating day, from either a great amount of news and information, or from a complete lack of information and uncertainty. So we'll see. Back to you, Dave.
Awesome. Agreed on the maybe too much info or no info. We may span the spectrum this afternoon. Justin, let's talk about Cracker Barrel. Let's talk about let's regurgitate some of the missteps of that company and where you think they should have gone.
Two major missteps. One is a communications misstep. Don't ever, roll out a plan and commit to something and then back down ever. Unless you're wrong. I mean, this is the thing. If you're wrong, or you've done something morally wrong, or you've committed an error, always, apologize and commit to. It's basically the ABCs of comms, is what I call it. Acknowledge the problem, briefly apologize, and commit to action moving forward. Those are, but then you're done. You don't keep hashing it. You apologize once anyway. This wasn't one of those moments. It's a logo. You didn't do anything dumb. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything immoral. And so when you send inconsistent viewpoints like that, or when you make a decision like that, then you reverse everything. All of your critics are correct in accusing you of a dumb decision. And of course, that shakes shareholders. They're like, well, why did you do this in the first place? So it's, you when you make a decision like that, you stick with it. Every single brand redo gets pushback, like every time. I mean, sometimes people like it, but most of the time, especially a brand like Cracker Barrel, when you have a lot of people who've been going there for decades, generally an older demographic, which is one of the problems they were trying to correct for, you're going to get pushback. And so you stick with it. You say, hey, we get it. Don't worry. Nothing's changing. None of the stuff you like is changing. We're just refreshing the thing. We're doing, anyway. So big mistake number one is going back on it way too fast. I think that was actually the problem. But the other thing is rebrand just for rebrand's sake, because the rebrand point was to get a younger demographic in there and get, because their demographic was aging out. They wanted to appeal to a wider audience. Great. What rebrands don't do that. Rebrands they're a signal for deeper changes that already happened or are happening. So Cracker Barrel could have come up on the right side of this by saying, with this rebrand, or they could have just saved themselves when they got the freak out from the rebrand and saying, look, we know people love Cracker Barrel. We know our customers love Cracker Barrel. And so we're not changing the menu. What we are changing is the farmness or freshness of our ingredients. We want this, this is like you're on the farm. That's the motif. Well, we're going to be more authentic in that farm thing. We're going to work with local egg producers. We're going to work with local pork producers. We're going to, whatever that looks like. And we're going to turn the clock back instead of 20, 2015, 2020 agricultural practices. We're dialing things back, and we're going to make this like 1940s agricultural processes. We're going to source things locally. This was their golden opportunity, and they absolutely blew it because A, they didn't stick with the original plan, and B, the rebrand didn't signal absolutely any meaningful changes outside of, lipstick on a pig, right? So this was a lipstick on a pig effort. And the worst thing about applying lipstick on a pig that was meant to make things look better is then removing the lipstick. Like, why'd you bother the pig? Why'd you bring attention to it? So anyway, if it was just a rebrand alone, they're not going to commit to any of the underlying structural changes that were desperately needed, then at least stick with your gut and don't back out on something that you spent all this money transitioning over, because that shows instability to shareholders. That shows instability, uncertainty, and incompetence to your customers.
Okay.
I tried
All
to
of
make
that
that
comment.
really, really tight
No,
so I
no.
didn't drone
That
on
that
forever.
First of all, you can drone on anytime you want. We love rants here. The second thing is the folks in the audience, if you don't realize, like if it hasn't been said out loud, Justin is a marketing maven. And so
I'm
appreciate,
putting that on my website now.
go for it. Especially put a quote, put me in parentheses next to
Oh,
it,
I
whatever you want.
absolutely will, and I'm going to
If
get
that
billions of dollars in business now.
if that adds legitimacy. Cracker Barrel stock, folks. So Julie Messino, who used to work at Taco Bell, uh, took over in 2023 at Cracker Barrel. The stock at the time was at $100 a share. Today it's at $54 a share. So she rode this thing the whole way down. She was operating in a difficult environment in the sense that there were a lot of upstarts in the food business during that period of time. There was a change in tastes that went on. We had explosion on Mexican Chipotle. We had explosion on Taco Bell. We had a bunch of kind of fresher food offerings. So certainly not an easy environment to operate in. However, that is no excuse to have your market cap cut in half during your tenure. The refresh, as Justin pointed out, was bungled. Whether it's her fault or it's consultant's fault, the buck stops with her. They also need a scapegoat for all this. Honestly, I mean, if you're a board of a company, there's no way you let this person hang in there, even though the stock is up 100%. Over the past 6 months. It's not a good look. They've probably been searching for a CEO for a while, and they finally found one. And it's time for Miss Messino to go because they need to resuscitate this business even after the about face on the rebrand. So I think that that's what this boils down to. Don't shed a tear for Julie Messina. I am sure that she will find a job. She probably won't become the next CEO of Starbucks, but she will certainly stay in that space. The retail leadership space is a very tight cabal of people, and they all watch out for one another. And it's very rare, even when you do go down with a ship, that you will not find some continuation in your executive life if you so choose to continue your executive life. So
You
yeah.
Well, I was going to say you bring up Starbucks, and they're probably the example of someone who did stick with their initial decisions despite overwhelming pushback. And like one of the best examples is Howard Schultz, and he came back because the sales were slumping. So he came back I think during the 2008 financial crisis, he was leading, and I had the honor of interviewing him about this exact moment for about a half an hour on my show many years ago. It was I'm just absolutely like still stunned that I got to talk to this guy. One of my like business heroes. But I asked him about that, and he mentioned that he got overwhelming shareholder and even board member pushback in 2008 when the entire board and many shareholders wanted him to cut down healthcare coverage for part-time employees. For those that don't know, Starbucks employees, even part-time employees, get healthcare coverage. And they said, the quote from him was, "Howard, no one's going to blame you for cutting this because we're in a financially awful time right now." And it was really interesting getting a look inside like a top level Fortune CEO and how he deals with a board and shareholders, because he really had to hold a line and stick his own neck out, because even though he's the founder, when you become the CEO and you have shareholders, you're not necessarily 100% in charge anymore. As you all know, you have to answer to your shareholders and board, and you can be removed at any time. We've seen that happen. Steve Jobs, I don't know if Chip Wilson was technically removed, but he stepped down due to board pressure. And so he was facing that pressure from his board, which, in the way he describes it, it sounds awful. It absolutely sounds awful, because basically the board and shareholders say, "Okay, buddy, you better be right about this, because if you're not, there's going to be hell to pay." And it's a very public hell. So to go back to what David said earlier, it may have been true that she had so much pressure from shareholders when the first rebrand debacle, when people started reacting negatively, they should have seen that because it happens every time. And so what makes a great leader is the people who stick with the original plan despite the pressure. And when everyone's freaking out on the ship, The captain's got to stay focused on the horizon and's got to stay focused on the destination they want to take the ship. And so the leaders that often struggle with this are the ones who don't know what the future vision of the company is. They don't have a strong sense of that future vision, and therefore the waves and the crew of the ship easily toss them around. So um, yeah, I don't want to throw her under the bus or anybody. It's a insanely tough job, and you're dealing with intense pressure and stress constantly. And you have board members, employees, other executives, and shareholders constantly telling you, you better be right about this or else. So, obviously she was in probably a really, really awful position. But I would encourage anybody to read Howard Schultz's book Onward. Not paid sponsorship or anything, of course, but it really gives you an incredible look into the CEO role of a very large growing company and what they deal with and the decisions they have to make.
Super. Really helpful. Certainly insight that I cannot give. So thank you very much, Justin, always. Folks, folks in the audience, to the extent that you don't like our discussion, I'm going to take a different tact than Eric, who is totally right. First of all, mute is always my go-to. Like, if I'm not going to block you, it's fine. Mute is just as easy for me. I get the same effect. Not a big deal. But folks, anybody in the audience who has a negative commentary on the show, on whatever we say, on conclusions we draw, topics we decide to hit on, I'm more than happy to have you up on stage to one up us, to better us. No problem. And I say that genuinely. So feel free to criticize. It's all good. We take criticism in stride. But at the same time, please, if you don't like how we're going up here, please feel free to join us. We're always happy to add to our show. We're sure that you will do a great job helping us out. Andy Kaufman, your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of want to throw a little bit of the devil's advocate to what was just said around leadership and from a CEO standpoint, and that you have to stay with your view even when you're wrong, etc. I think a leader needs to know when you need to do an about face and when you need to kind of stand tall and say, hey, this is what I believe and this is the right move. I think they just bungled also the rebrand on the way back. I think there's ways they could have spun it easily into a hilarious situation, made commercials about changing, some of the greatest brands in history and why it works. They could have easily, gone the other way. They could have invited Trump there and made it a whole public image of him eating there, and then going back and changing it back, and therefore everyone who was on that view could have gone with him. I think they of course they admitted it. They changed their actions, right? They did the ABCs, whatever. But I think they could have easily done it in a bigger way and made this an advantage for them. But instead, it just looked like they ran back with their tail between their legs and had no leadership. So I agree with that. I just think there's some other ways they could have played this, and I think they failed, quite frankly. That's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, Andy's right, like 100% right. I'll just it's going to sound like I'm splitting hairs. I'm not. But there is a difference between view and vision. And so vision is that long-term thing that does not change. It's like what's the peak? Like, we want to conquer Everest or something like that. It's way too much to get into a finance show, but the vision for a leader, like the future of the company, the future state of the company, the problem they want to solve, that does not change. It changed maybe 5, 10 years, maybe 10 years you can change it. Mission can change, like the how you get to that vision, that can change more frequently. But Andy's right. Viewpoints, if you're a CEO or a leader and you have viewpoints and they're challenged and you're wrong, those can change daily. So yeah, Andy's completely right. I just wanted to make a distinction there because I don't want people to think great leadership is never changing your viewpoint or your decisions. Never changing your mind or viewpoint or decisions. That's called stupidity. Great leaders change their mind constantly because they hear great information. I was just making the distinction between long-term concrete vision, which leaders need to stick with. But yeah, day-to-day views, those change all the time. Correct. I totally agree.
Honest, I'll get to you in a second. I just want to say, since I went ahead and gave some commentary on the haters on the show, We got a lot of love. So thank you. I thank you genuinely, all the people in the audience that reacted in such a kind way to the criticisms that we receive. Listen, it's part of being a public, I don't know, whatever.
We should probably rebrand because of all this criticism.
we we definitely thank the support of the audience. Totally all good. I understand there is a pool of people on this show. You cannot satisfy everybody all the time. It's impossible. Even in a small group of people, let alone in a very large group where we don't even know everybody personally, all across the earth, different walks of life, and so forth. So we try to do our best, folks. I know you appreciate that. Anyway, enough fluff about the show. Anas, good morning. What is going on? Are we going to strike Iran very hard, as Trump just said, or is it just more talk and the market just wants to do whatever it wants to do off the back of that? Please go
Good
ahead.
morning. The president basically on Fox News Live, he used the F word and the S word. So that tells you how much frustration they have. Oil prices are up by about 5%, of course, as attacks on Iranian attack on Jordan. It's a U.S. Base in Jordan that's been attacked. Then last night there was a joint attack by the U.S. and Saudi Arabia on Iran's cronies in Iraq, and it was a massive attack. And the reason why, because this group hit Saudi Aramco facilities the day before, so this was a reply. This was a reply to it. Brent is now above 86. However, if you seriously look at what's going on in the oil market, uh, the things that are lined up right now in the oil market are just unbelievable. We have about 13 events. All of them are bullish events. Whether you talk about the Three Seas crisis, the Gulf, the Red Sea, the Black Sea, you talk about the Panama Canal, you talk about the Rhine River. I'll talk about the Rhine River in a minute. About the attacks on Russia refineries. You talk about the heat wave. You talk about the shutdown of nuclear reactors, etc. It's just like so many things, and a lot of people are frustrated because oil prices should not be in the 80s if we have all these things. And of course, they accuse the Trump administration of manipulation, etc. Yes, we do have manipulation, and you got to remember that the oil market is not competitive anyway, and a lot of people play the market, etc. But what we learned from history is very clear. If you want to manipulate the market and play the market, you cannot do it often. So you can do it a couple of times, then people will realize the game, and they will play you. So to tell me that Trump been playing the market every time $10 either way for 20 times, and then we have not woken up yet, it does not make any sense. And what the irony here is, it is the same people who said Saudi Arabia and OPEC failed at manipulating the market because they were too smart to wake up to OPEC games and the Saudi games. Right now, they said, oh, we cannot play the market and play Trump. Anyway, uh, the uh, uh, the attack on Iraq, I think, was very severe. The prime minister of Iraq, or the new prime minister of Iraq, was supposed to visit Saudi Arabia, and the visit got canceled. But looking at the attack on Jordan last night, it is very clear what we've been saying all along on this show, that there are extreme elements of the IRGC that will do whatever to derail the negotiations. So as you all know, there was an effort at negotiations in the last couple of days, and those guys just ruined it. And the US was after this group in recent attacks, which last about 14 days, and they've been after them, not after Iran as a whole, just the assets of this group. The problem for the US and all the neighbors of Iran is that this group acts like militia and not like a regular army. And they fight a guerrilla warfare. So now, listen to this. It's been reported by Reuters this morning that Iran, to get Chinese shoulder launched missiles system in weeks. Why they need that? Because this is again the extreme group in the IRGC that wants to fight guerrilla warfare. And a regular army does not need that unless you have invaders, which means that that tells you things are going to get worse because all they get to do just send a guy or two to the Hormuz Strait and hit a couple of ships with those missiles. So things are moving from one phase of army to army to guerrilla groups. Um, as a result of what's been happening at Bab el Mandeb. Now, let me repeat what I said in the last couple of days. In Bab el Mandeb, Saudi oil is going through as long as it is being carried on foreign ships. So as long as it's Chinese or Pakistani or others, then it can go through. One of the reasons why it's not only the Houthis. One of the reasons why, because London insurance companies decided to revoke the war insurance on Saudi-owned ships. So Saudi oil is still going, but not as much as before. And the question now is, will the Saudis export this through the northern Red Sea? We had a 1 hour and a half space last night on these issues. For those who are interested, it says in the pin tweet. And the conclusion of it is, can the Saudis export 6 million barrels out of the West through the northern Red Sea? And the answer is yes, a big yes. But we have problems, and that was discussed in the space for those who are interested. But as a result, Russian crude basically is going through Bab el Mandeb easily without any problems, and that raised the price of Russian crude, and so Putin is a winner again. And the discounts of Russian oil to India, for example, is only $1 or $2 instead of 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. So India got stuck now. They have to pay the higher price, but Putin is making the money. Ukraine said it attacked two major Russian refineries a few hours ago. These are different from the refineries they hit earlier, a couple of weeks earlier. Of course, during those 2 weeks, they've been hitting oil facilities and ports and tankers. And again, the problem we have is that the crisis in the energy markets is in the petroleum products markets. So we are talking about diesel, gasoline, jet fuel, base oil, etc. It's not in crude. So the problem is in products markets. And prices are going through the roof, especially in some countries in Europe and other places. And Trump been complaining about gasoline prices in the United States for a while. And the question is why they are letting Ukraine go through this campaign, because they are increasing prices even in the United States. Here's why. Russia was an exporter of gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and everything else. And now they are importing it. So they are competing with the Asian countries and Europeans and everyone else to get the fuel. So they are raising prices. And I'll go back to Ukraine in a minute here because this is kind of an issue related to Germany. Yesterday, I told you about the craziness of LNG shipping. And I told you about Cyprus, I told you about Peru, about Chile, etc. Here is another one today. It just probably I need to write a book about all those jokes in LNG shipping. Uniper, which is a German energy company, and Canadian project, LNG project, Silismus, signed a long-term LNG supply agreement. Now, this project basically is in northern British Columbia. So it's on the western side of Canada, kind of like across the ocean from Japan or some. You can look at the map and see what it is. And the reason why Uniper signed this contract, despite the fact that they have all the options in the world to sign contracts for LNG, they signed it because of its environmental impact. Because they say they are doing things that makes it the least kind of CO2 dense LNG in the world. So the Germans signed this contract because it had the lowest emission LNG facilities in the world. And the reason why? Because it's powered by hydropower. Here's the problem. Please look at the map. How you are going to deliver LNG from Western Canada to Germany? Again, look at the map. How you are going to deliver that? If you deliver that directly, the CO2 will be emitted from shipping. It's just massive because you have to go around the world to reach Germany. So literally, you have to go down all the way around South America because you cannot use the Panama Canal, and then turn around past South America, North America, and they'll go up to Germany. So the CO2 emissions basically are massive. Well, they said, well, probably we need to do swaps. Great. So you are going to get the American LNG, the dirty American LNG, and you sign the contract with Canada because it's clean? Because you just need the reputation of the contract? So you can see the irony in this. Remember the following. Germany, the queen of green, is a strong supporter of Ukraine and wants to stop importing everything from Russia. Yet, every single minute, they consume Russian gas. Every single minute. How? They claim we don't import any gas from Russia. That is correct because they have a contract with Russia, a long-term contract or long-term LNG contract with Russia, and they play the game. The game basically is they let France import that LNG, regasify it in France, and then pipe it to Germany. They love those games. They want to look green, but they are in reality not green at all. In fact, going back to Ukraine, they do support Ukraine. They do support the campaign by Ukraine to hit those refineries. Can you imagine the level of emissions and CO2 comes when you set those refineries on fire? And yet you want to sign a contract with an LNG unit in northwestern Canada because it's cleaner than others. Speaking of Germany, the company BASF is the world's largest chemical company by revenue. Again, it is a German multinational that produces almost everything, a wide range of chemicals, plastics, performance materials, agricultural solutions, and other products. Its main production complex relies heavily on the Rhine barges, the Rhine River. And the Rhine River right now, the water in it is at its lowest level in 36 years. So 40% of the raw materials, product transport, etc., comes on those barges. And the company, after the low water level in 2018, they've been very kind of innovative in trying to solve the problems by creating certain type of barges that can go in a 30 centimeter water, or that's almost 1 foot of water in the Rhine. But the reason why I brought this up, because the CEO in an interview said that they might declare force majeure because of the low water levels, and this is a crisis for many things around the world because of the things that this company produces. So the issue here is while Germany or the leaders of Germany are going across the world to sign a contract in Canada because they worry about climate change, they don't have even water. They cannot even produce products within Germany. That's how crazy things are. Even before you talk about the Hormuz Strait and you talk about Bab el-Mandeb, etc., look what's happening in Europe.
When
So we
what
have all those.
Anas, Can I ask, when they declare force majeure on something like that, does everybody automatically respect it, inclusive of insurance companies? Or there's a whole host of litigation that's going to follow in the wake of this quote unquote force majeure because of low water levels?
I think, look, you and others are the lawyers. I am not a lawyer, but I know one thing. Whenever you talk about the weather, it's always your biggest excuse. So it is kind of always very successful when you blame weather, even with the all of us experience the airlines and everything else. So, but the issue here is the ripple effect of these things are huge, and you can see that the European leaders are completely disconnected from reality. When fuel prices are at record high, you have this heat wave, and you have all kind of problems, and you still worried about, oh, I want to import LNG from the other side of the world because it has lower emissions than others. That shows you how far away from reality uh, they are. The final comment, that if you look at where we are going right now, it is clearly, even if you believe that oil prices will rise again significantly, you got to remember the following. We are heading for a massive economic disaster if you really believe that Brent is going to go to 150 or any other price, etc. I think the damage already been done, and we are experiencing the damage right now. The data for the second quarter is not out yet. But things dragging like this are not sustainable, and something got to give. Back to you.
Awesome, Anas. Thank you, as always. Folks, we had a couple of other earnings that came out overnight and into the morning in the luxury space. Hermes and Kering, which owns Gucci, came out with earnings. Now, Hermes has been a very strong stock. It has been thought to be immovable because of the permanence of things like a Birkin bag and things like along those lines. The company came out with earnings and they were less than enthusiastic about China. Right? We've been talking about how China's luxury market has seen a slowdown. China purchasing generally has seen a slowdown, and they have not regained momentum there. So the stock is off. I don't know, so anywhere between 8 and like 11% throughout the period of time since they reported. On the other end of the spectrum, Keurig has been in turnaround mode. They've been the stock has gotten crushed over the past couple of years. They've lost their way in terms of designer leadership. Gucci has not been as all powerful as it was, let's call it, in the late '90s, early 2000s, and even the 2010s. And so that stock, they had progress to report on their turnaround. Stocks up in the double digits percentage. So no indication that the movement in the stock price. The reason I'm highlighting this is the movement in the stock price does not show you that Kering is a stronger company, than Hermes is. It's showing you that the expectations were quite high for Hermes, and the expectations for Kering were quite low because of the difficulties that it has seen, and both reported earnings that were contrary to expectations. The other set of earnings that we got was out of UBS. We've already seen all the big banks reported last week. Along with the rest of the big banks, UBS did well. Uh, Global wealth management, big focus of UBS. New assets increased by $35 billion. Net profit was great. And they're going to repurchase at least $1 billion worth of shares over the next 3 months, along with 2 billion more after that. Credit Suisse purchase and integration may be behind it, and now UBS moving on with respect to its post Credit Suisse integration life. I just wanted to make sure before we get closer to the close of the show, we're going to have a show later today. I'll send out the link. We'll meet up at 2:30 for the announcement from the Fed. That will be made at 2 o'clock, and then the press conference will start at 2. Sorry, we'll meet up at 2, and then the press conference will start at 2:30. Um, and then the last thing I wanted to mention was also later today, after the close, we have Microsoft, Meta, and Robinhood, amongst others, reporting. So that will be important for tomorrow's show. Eric, I'll get to your hand on whatever you want to discuss, but let's also discuss what's going on inside of FIFA and the monetization that is being executed on there or sought to be executed on there because of the performance of this year's World Cup and likely the increasing value of FIFA as a result. Please go ahead.
Thank you, David. Okay, good point. Let's talk about FIFA first. Essentially, this World Cup, there's a whole story behind it, and the reason why Infantino is there in place. Sepp Blatter and Michel Platini. Michel Platini used to be the best player for France and even for Europe for quite a while before Zidane and that generation. And Platini was vice president, and Sepp Blatter, who's a Swiss citizen, was the head of the FIFA. FIFA, for those who don't know, is Fédération Internationale de Football Association. It's a French name. It was started there in Europe for very specific reasons a long time ago. And in this World Cup, everything has changed. What happened? Why Sepp Blatter and Platini went out? There were some shenanigans with a few countries, but mostly Platini got exonerated. The United States wanted the World Cup again. It had for those who are too young, in 1994, the United States had the honor of hosting the World Cup. Countries rarely host the World Cup. I mean, a lot of countries compete to host it, and they rotate, every 4 years. So hosting to World Cup is usually is very far apart in terms of years. And the US wanted it again, and essentially the FIFA committee wanted to give it to other countries too, because its main aim is to popularize the sport around the world. And since 1994 already had it in the US, 1998 was France, 2002 they went to Korea to diversify. And so they wanted for the 2018 and 2022 editions, they decided on Russia and Qatar. Yes, not very democratic countries, not very clean, but they did what it was necessary to organize it there. The Americans didn't like it, so they did a whole investigation things. It did pull out a few things from FIFA, which they found out, some of which are true, some of which were just political hit. And they got Infantino there, who finally accepted to send the World Cup again back to the United States in a very funny way, because this time we got Canada, US, and Mexico together at a time when the World Cup is happening in this summer, where the US is fighting Canada and Mexico, invites, like Trump invited for the final Carney, and the next day he starts again having a major trade war angry at him. It's such a clown show, it's crazy. Now, this is the political background. Financially, this World Cup has been a resounding success because if you define success for the World Cup as being financial, which is not what the Football Association was made for. That's not the first aim. The first aim was to get football going, get popularized, help it to grow, develop. Yeah. So slightly different. Money is needed to do that, but money is not the first major aim. But Infantino, you know how he is. He has presided over a World Cup where essentially he's been kowtowing to Trump. He even overturned a red card for him. He's become heavily politicized. He wants to privatize it now, probably to the demand of Trump or other people around him, and maybe Infantino in his own philosophy as well. And I'm very much against it. Look at what he's done with the game. He put a halftime show, typical. I know for Americans it's normal in Super Bowl. For the rest of the world, it's absolutely not normal to have this in the middle of a game, especially when you want to compare statistics generation after generation. If you want to compare Pele, Maradona, and Messi, and you change the game, how are you going to compare them? The halftime show, now they have a hydration break. Hydration break was exactly what halftime was about. But now they have hydration break, which is essentially commercial break. They commercialize the whole FIFA so much just to make money. They're changing the game. Some people will say, well, it gives more revenue, it's better. Some people like me and UEFA, the European Football Association, are against, and they came very vocally against it. They intend to move against FIFA on that, and this is creating a big rift. Gianni Infantino decided he's very sharp on the way he's doing stuff. He decided to tell all the individual countries' football associations, I will give you $40 million if you vote for my proposal, and only 10 million if you vote against it. Because the way it works is FIFA has votes from all these countries around the world that are part of the world football, essentially. And he's essentially trying to buy them. He's essentially going with the carrot, saying, if you vote for it, I'll give you more money. But this will ruin the way the World Cup is or has been for 100 years, in my own opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion around the world. You can check what Europeans are thinking about it across left and right. And from Trump's perspective, it's like, no, we want to make money. We're going to make more money. We're going to generate more money. Prices at the final have reached many thousands of dollars, even in some second-year matches. It's getting crazy. It is really for the wealthy to attend. That could be still okay to some extent because everybody can watch it on TV. But there is such an imbalance growing in football and changing the game. I'm okay with the VAR, with the change that you have for the video replay, that you can have more accuracy for a goal if it's a fake goal or whatever, or a foul. But beyond that, no, if you change the game too much, you don't have comparison anymore, unless you really prove that, no, it is for the better. But what does better means? Does it mean more revenue for people who own it? And it's going to be privatized, so Trump's cronies are going to make a lot of money, and probably Infantino himself too. Or is it really for the greater good of the game worldwide? So I'm against this move for FIFA to go the American football way. Some people disagree in the US, I know, but I think it is very important to watch, because this is going to pit the world against each other again. We know that Europe and United States are getting far apart on many issues. Just to add to that, David, sorry about that, but I need to mention that even in the United Nations now for human rights, you have a conflict between France and the US, between 110 countries and a few on the side of the US. So this era is being marked by a big wedge in philosophy, in perception of how the institutions should be around the world, between the US and the rest of the Western world. And this is very bad, because we're talking about, Russia, China going authoritarian against free speech, this and that. It's handing them the momentum, and I don't like it. I really don't like the way this is going. And to come back also to the Chinese stuff, this is what I wanted to talk about originally, is the economy. China's economy is weakening. Europe's economy, you heard Anas, it's weakening too. There's such a clown show over there. So we're heading financially to a reckoning. The cracks have started with the AI, but they will not stop at the AI. Over the next 2 years, you're going to have a lot of reckoning. You add the Hormuz clown show and the effect of the energy prices on the economies, we're going to have a lot of red in the coming couple of years, and it's not going to be so good. It's okay for us because we get ready for it. Yeah, if you know when to get out and when to get in, which stock to pick, like Tikoski is doing, it is fine. But for the economy in general, we're going to suffer a hard time. So I don't like this division, and I will end on that, not to take too much time. David, I'm not sure I can be there at 2 o'clock this
No
afternoon. I'll
problem.
try my best.
That's
But
okay. That's okay.
yeah.
We will carry on regardless. I think Dave Nikoski's hand was up at some point and then got tired. Dave, I'm sorry I didn't call on you earlier. I will get to Paul, who maybe has something to say about FIFA, but please go ahead, Dave.
No, I just was taking notes on what Anna said. So the only way to increase the CO2 emissions is to get the LNG from Mars or the moon, right? I just want to make sure that's crystal clear. By the way, um, going through charts, I highlighted 109 charts that went out this morning in a product called Booster Shots, which is, going through the Russell 3000. I had to pare it back. I think that's the most I've ever highlighted in the last 3 years. So insurance names are just on fire. Cobiz just got a takeout offer. It's a chart I've been highlighting a number of times. The Ford chart looks great. They reported earnings. I've been bullish on Toyota Motors. Boston Scientific, which traded up after earnings, and they're taking a restructuring charge, so it's coming right back down to the recent lows, right around the 42.50 level. So one I didn't hit, but I'm sticking with my theme there. I'm seeing, Kraft Heinz, General Mills, Campbell's carving out a bottom. The amount of insurance stocks, which I've talked about on the show, a month ago, Progressive was one of the names I highlighted. It came back and touched support, dipped through it for a short period of time and rocketed back up. But you have, Marsh and McLennan, KNSL, FNF, Willis Towers Watson, BWin, FG. There's just I am in awe of the amount of names bottoming, where relative strength is turning up. You look at everything in the payment processors from ADP, to Paylocity to Paychecks. I mean, these things are absolutely going gangbusters relative to what you see in the semis. And my belief again is, if you throw 75 trillion into the market and it starts pulling out somewhere, it's going somewhere else. Equifax, EEFT, ADT, which is an alarm company, seeing a lot of bottoms there. Some of the paper stocks have bottomed, and a lot of software names: Verisk, VRSK, DocuSign, GoDaddy, GitLabs, Manhattan Associates, Nutanix, Paycom. Yeah, I just I'm in awe of how many bottoms are being formed out there as everyone looks at the Kospi and Japan's index. So there's a lot to do out there. There's more from a diversified set of sectors than I have seen in 3 years. So take that for what it's worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for mentioning CBiz. Folks, this is important. This is important in the accounting world. So CBiz acquired Markham 2 years ago exactly, to become the seventh largest accounting firm. It leapfrogged over Grant Thornton. Grant Thornton is private. Grant Thornton is today acquiring CBiz. The consolidation that goes on in large accounting firms um, is inevitable on the one hand because annoying regulations, make costs that much higher. You get synergies, is just easier. At the end of the day, however, for big businesses and certainly for public companies, this sucks. It sucks because there are less players. It sucks because pricing for sure goes up, but at the same time, you don't have many accounting firms to choose from, and it's not even about pricing. It's just about getting service. And once these firms get so large, certain clients below a certain threshold don't even make sense to them to service, and so you're left with a very difficult quandary for smaller public companies and larger private companies. They really have a difficult time finding service providers on the audit side of the business to service them. And so this will continue to go. I think regulators are well aware of this, and frankly, they don't have a solution, and therefore they're not doing anything about it. And it is up to the companies themselves to figure it all out. But that's a big deal in the accounting and audit world today. Paul, your hand, my friend. Go ahead.
Oh, I had just posted on the Nest the some things on FIFA, the stadium capacity by country for the 2026. Just kind of give Eric some feedback. The U.S. venues average 69,000 seats versus it was about 10,000 more than Mexico average, and then about 20,000, 22,000 more than the Canadian. So I think the view was that this was probably one of the most uh, most successful from at least attendance because of the scale that the U.S. venues had. And I don't know, like I remember the '94 uh, the FIFA World Cup in the U.S. It was kind of boring and it was kind of, you know, kind of like maybe half-hearted. I remember watching it. I was like, this is garbage. But now they really stepped up this year. I think, all the cities, although, they complained a lot about having to take on some of the expenses, I think they definitely had to have gotten more. I'm sure they'll look at it in terms of tax revenue, kind of advertising for their city. But the venues, like, look at all the videos were about how amazing the venues were, how amazing, how different the United States perception was to the people versus not kind of what they are used to. So I think from that standpoint, like, I think the U.S. is really going to push again, as Trump had he demanded. I think the next available World Cup for the U.S. But I think it was really the venues. Like when you go to these places, um, the scale is kind of like amazing, and I think even to the average European who are used to their like local club stadium, which is, there's a lot of history in those stadiums, but they're small, right? You're kind of close to the action. Uh, we have a different level or scale here just based on, a lot of these were SEC football or NFL football stadiums. And it's different, right? And I think people they're not gonna have to go to another place. I think, some of the previous places like South Africa and was it Qatar? Well, I forget what it was. It Qatar? They had to build the stadiums, right? We have all the stadiums in place, and even then, it was like they're used to putting on big arena shows or arena games, whereas all those stadiums they had built, there was a lot of like wrinkles because they had just built them. They hadn't put on these big productions. So I think the U.S. is gonna definitely push again, and I don't know. It's it. Although the average person, I didn't go to any games. I didn't really want to pony up the money to go watch any of these games. I watched most of them on TV, and it was really fun to watch. And I went out with some people to watch games. But I think the scale is kind of like what people are going to get used to, and it's only going to be like how the other countries going to compete. I think some can, but mostly they don't have these large football teams that play on Sundays every fall. To kind of handle it, they don't have these large stadiums in place. So I think that was the big benefit of the U.S. And I think the success was it was right there on the you could see it in the reaction of the fans and all these videos they put
Yeah,
out.
they added, we have to mention that this World Cup, they added 50% of teams. So they used to have, in 1994, we had 24 teams. They raised it to 32 later on, and this time they raised to 48. So raising it to 48 enabled it to go to 3 countries, fill the stadiums, and have a lot of games, so make it much more lucrative. So it can be viewed as a good thing in that sense because you see more people have their national team on display, so that may be a good thing. However, it puts it less countries able to organize it for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. So there's pros and cons on that side. I'm happy to see more teams, of course, being participating. However, it is much more difficult than to organize. And just like you say, you need the infrastructure. Not every country will have it. So it will restrict the ability for the World Cup to go in other countries around the world. So there's plus and minus to that. Something which will need to be debated. You're absolutely right about that. And yes, Qatar, which is a very small country, had to build stadiums very fast just for that. I'm not too sure they're going to use them again after. So this could be viewed as a waste too. The other side of the coin is that, well, at least it went to the Middle East. It popularized the sport around the world. I mean, they try, right, FIFA to go around the world when they can to popularize the sport. For the audience, for those who don't know, football, soccer is by far the most watched. The World Cup is the most watched event on the planet of any event, like 1 to 2 billion telespectators. I think only the Apollo landing reaches that level of viewership. Back to you.
All right. Oh, Anas, go ahead. You can have the last word, sir.
Yeah, we are going to end up with two funny comments here. The first one is to go back to Germany's LNG contract with Western Canada. Environmentalists in Canada are against the project. and they organized against it, and they go through the whole rabbit hole of proving how the project itself basically is not environmental friendly, and they go and talk about the CO2 emissions from building the big dam that will produce the hydro. So the argument here is they are really going all the way down to prove that this is not an environmental friendly project. That's the first comment. The second funny comment is environmentalists, when you follow the same approach and tell them, okay, you followed all of this to the cement that is used to build the dam. Let's do that with solar and wind. Do you know what they will do to you? They will block you. Back to you.
All right, on us. All right, folks. This was a great show. I appreciate everybody's involvement and hanging in and sticking in through the entire show. We will be back, as I said, at 2 o'clock this afternoon. I'll send out the link shortly. We will air the press conference from Kevin Warsh, and then we will be back here again tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to cover a bunch of important earnings. I wish everyone a great day. Thank you for a great show. And we'll see you a little bit later or tomorrow morning. Take care.